chose a topic for today's shir, and I spoke in the Minhal of Harnot in the morning with a shorter version. And then, in between, a friend of mine sent me the regular distribution of Victor Miller's house works. And it's exactly the same topic that I chose. So I want to introduce the topic by reading to you what he wrote, which I think is very important. And then I'll share with you the ideas that I had about it. This is in a Q&A. And the question that the person asked is, how do we concentrate on the churban, on the destruction of the temple, and still not cause ourselves to be be'atzvus? Atzvus means depression. Sometimes it's translated as sadness, but in our literature, atzvus is always negative. It's something which robs you of your ambition, robs you of your self-confidence, causes you to feel that there's no hope for anything better. How can we concentrate on the destruction of the temple, not fall into that state of mind? Doesn't it say, Pasuk of Dovid HaMelech, if you do as Hashem is simple, you're supposed to serve the Kadosh Baruch Hu with joy? What happens to that when we're thinking about the destruction of the temple? So Rabbi writes as follows. Let me tell you something. If you have a successful Tisha B'Av, you're becoming a happy man as a result. It's Gil B'Ra'ada. Now, Gil B'Ra'ada usually means to rejoice, and B'Ra'ada means shaking, trembling. So usually it's taken to mean when you're happy, make sure that you're not 100% happy. We don't live in a 100% happy world. The condition of the Jewish people and our own condition isn't 100% happy. When you're happy, make sure there's some shaking, like when you break a glass at a wedding, or you put ashes on the forehead of a person. But he's reading it the opposite way. He's reading it that through the ra'ada, through the shaking, you should come to the yield, you should come to the happiness. It's a different way of reading the pasuk. You rejoice from your trembling. If you're able to sit on the floor, and this apparently was not on Tisha B'Av when he was speaking, he says, even now you can sit on the floor. You don't have to wait for Tisha B'Av. Sit down for a moment on the floor and think of what we once had. Think of what we once had, think of what we lost. It's a shleimus, it's a perfection, it's a success in you to sit on the floor for 1 minute before you go to sleep and say, Al Na'aros Bobo, the psalm about when we were in Babylonia. The fact that you can do that shows what kind of greatness, what kind of ability you have. So he says, you never did it? Do it now. Someone is sitting on the floor right now. Imagine you're doing it too. It's a greatness of spirit to mourn for the past. The more you mourn for the past, the more you're going to rejoice for the rest of your life. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give you happiness and he'll give you, now he uses a Chazal statement, Pe'er Takas Eker. There's a word in Hebrew, Peit Ayin Reish, which means a kind of glory, and it refers to the tefillin. And there it says you're going to have Efer, Aleph Pei Reish, which refers to the letter of the words. And that means that you don't put on tefillin because what was glorious becomes ashes. He's telling you you're going to get glory from the ashes. The ashes will lead to glory. Not in the world to come. Right now, it would be Pe'er Tachas Efer. So you won't be sad because of Tisha B'Av. Nobody becomes sad because of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av makes you feel that you worked and you accomplished something. It means that being sad and appreciating the loss is a spiritual gesture, a spiritual expression that's very precious. And together with the sadness, it's something which you should treasure. It's a little bit like some people misuse the concept of codependency, and they tell you, if you really become attached to something, it's inevitable that you become separated from it, and then it will be tragic, and then you may not be able to hold yourself together, you may not be able to function, you may not be able to focus. So protect yourself from the disorientation of losing it by not attaching yourself to something too much. Don't become too attached. What a tragically mistaken, corrupt vision that is. Why would I be disoriented? Why would I be depressed and detached when I lose something? Because it was so precious. So the life, the wisdom is, don't have anything precious in your life? Thank you very much. I'll take my chances. When you sit Shiva for a parent, and you think of the decades of wonderful, wonderful life that you had together, and you're devastated, you don't say, I wish it hadn't been so good. What you say is, being devastated is the right outcome for its having been so good. Here we're saying something in addition to that. The very fact that you feel devastated, the very fact that you are disoriented, is a symptom of how connected you are, how sensitive you are, how realistic you are. There are things that are really valuable in the world, and if you're missing them, you should feel sad about that loss. That means you're spiritually alive. So that's what I saw from Rabbi. So I wanted to start with the same question. If there was Hashem b'simcha, you're supposed to serve Hakadosh Baruch Hu with joy. How do you do that, let's say, on Tisha B'Av? But let's just check that the question is a real question. Serve Hashem with simcha. When are you serving Hashem? What is service of Hashem? Is there any time off from service of Hashem? The answer is no. It's 24/7, 365. So says the Rambam in Hilchos Deo, so says the Ramchal in Derech Hashem. Because, I'll give you the Ramchal's formulation. Service of Hashem has two dimensions. One is mitzvos, actions He commanded you to do. And the other dimension is all of the things that are necessary to be able to do the mitzvos that He commanded you to do. So if He told you to eat matzah, you have to have money to buy matzah. And that means you have to work. I know, I used that word in the yeshiva. Maybe it's poison, I shouldn't say that. If you have to work, then you have to work. And the working is serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Rambam says it's true for sleep. Because without sleep, you won't be able to do the mitzvos, you won't be able to do them, some of them all, and other ones you won't do with the quality that they require. So sleeping is also avoda. So avoda is 24/7, 365. So if that's the case, and Dovid HaMelech said, if there was Hashem b'simcha, so how are we supposed to do the avoda of mourning for the Beis HaMikdash b'simcha? There's a tour that writes about this question. He's writing about when you make the blessing dayin ha'emes, when you lose a parent or someone close to you, and you're acknowledging that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ways are just and are right, and he's explaining how you do that. It's based on Gemara, but we'll be very careful with the tour's words because what he writes is very, it's got a lot packed into a few words. Ashmur she'im tovos, when you hear a good tiding, lo v'lacherim, for him and for other people, mavorech hatov b'meitiv, you make the blessing, God is good and does good. That's what you say when it's good for others, including yourself. Now Ashmur's rose, bad tidings, something bad that happens. Uomer dayin ha'emes, which is either the judge of truth or the true judge. V'chayim adam levarech al ha'roah, a person is required to make the blessing on the bad tidings, and bad means bad. It's not just a joke, it's not in quotation marks, and it's all as if it were bad, it means bad. That's another shit. He has to make the blessing on something bad, b'das shlema v'nefesh chafetza, with a mind that's full understanding, and a desiring soul. Making the blessing, let's say, on the death of a parent. He's got to make it with a mind and a knowledge and an understanding that's full and a desirous soul. In the same way, a similar way to the way he blesses on something good with joy. Now, the scholar will say, okay, Rabbi, look, he said you make the blessing on good with joy, but when he described the blessing on the bad, he didn't say joy. He said, Das Shlema and Nefesh Chafetza, full knowledge and understanding and a desirous soul. Doesn't say simcha, right? Good. You have a good diuk. for about a line and a half. And a line and a half, you see that he means it also. Why? Why should he make this lesson with full identification and a desirous soul? He harov of the Hashem, he tovasam v'simchasam. Bad for those who serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu is their good and their joy. He's not saying it wasn't bad. It is bad. But it being bad is good for them and is a joy to them. And there's the word simcha, right? And we'll hear it again. Why? How could the bad thing be good for them? Because he's receiving, he's accepting what HaKadosh Baruch Hu decreed for him out of love. I know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves me and he means this to be for me, for my good. He receives it out of love. Nimsa shek b'kabbalas ro'azu, in his accepting this bad thing, which is a bad thing, hu oved Hashem, he's serving the Kadosh Baruch Hu. The words we were looking for. In doing it this way, in acknowledging that it's coming from love, and receiving it with love, he's doing a service of the Kadosh Baruch Hu, shehi simcha, and that's where his joy comes from. His joy comes from the avoda he does in accepting the thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu decreed upon. So here's an answer to how, when terrible things happen, you can still be Ibnus Hashem b'simcha. The question is, find the avoda. Where's the avoda in it? And for us, avoda automatically produces simcha, because simcha means a connection with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and avoda is that connection. So he looks into it and he says, what can I do now? What opportunity do I have now that I don't have other times? If it weren't really bad, it kills the whole shot. It means he doesn't have the opportunity. It's got to be really bad. So that he can say, I receive it with love. If you convince yourself that it's really good, it's no trick to receive it with love. It's good. Money in the bank. No, it's really bad. But what I do when it's really bad, I know that this bad thing is coming from the Kodesh Baruch Hu. It's like word for word in the Maharal. And when I accept it with love, that's a precious avoda that I can do, and it's the avoda that produces the simcha. So yes, avoda is 27,365, even in the midst, since there's always some avoda to do, even if it's the mitzvahs that you have to do, let's say in Avelis, there are mitzvahs to do, that's also a connection, but this supreme avoda of accepting out of love, that's something which is a very precious avoda, and because you have the opportunity to do a precious avoda, you have a simcha. That's what the Torah says. And interestingly, the Shulchan Aruch copies the Torah word for word. But then there's another question here. Yom Tov cancels Avelis. All the major holidays cancel Avelis, including Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And the reason is because there's a mitzvah of simcha on the holidays. And that simcha evaporates the Avelis. If you're in Avelis for a parent, where the Avelis has 3 stages, there's a 7-day stage, and a 30-day stage, and then another 11 months. So, 11 months altogether. If you're on the 3rd day of the 7, the past 4 days evaporate. You move immediately into the 30. If you're on the 20th day of the 30, the 10 days evaporate, you go into the year. If you're in the year, it ends it. Yom Tov ends it. So the idea of simcha seems to be incompatible with Avelis. To the extent where there's a contradiction, and when there's simcha, the Avelis has to be canceled. So I just made a case that you can have Avelis and simcha together. And now we're seeing in this halacha that you can't have them together. So I have an idea about this, but since it was my own idea, I asked Rabbi Barabas about it, and he confirmed that he thought it was a reasonable idea. Let's just use a little grammar. There's a difference between a verb and an adverb. A verb is what you're doing, and an adverb is how you do it. Well, these two sources for simcha, one is a verb and one is an adverb. On the holidays, it's v'samachta b'chagecha. The simcha is the verb of what you're doing. You are doing simcha. That's the activity. Dovid HaMelech said, Ibnu is Hashem b'simcha. What you're doing is avoda. How should you do it? it should be accompanied by simcha. An adverb is much more limited and is secondary to the primary performance. So here's what I suggest. When we're talking about the responsibility of simcha itself, there simcha does outweigh availus and cancels it. But when we're talking about the way in which you do the avoda, that it should be accompanied by simcha, there it doesn't cancel it out. And there you have the simcha and the experience of the tragedy side by side. This is a lesson in the difference between the heart and the mind. If you have two contradictory ideas in your head and you're inclined to believe in both of them, you're in trouble, because at least one of them is wrong, and maybe both of them are wrong. But if you have two contradictory emotions in your heart, you may be very realistic. You may be in an ideal circumstance. The heart can hold, rightfully, two contradictory emotions, whereas the brain is holding two contradictory opinions. Something's wrong. You probably have heard the phrase, a love-hate relationship. That's not a joke, and it's not unrealistic. People are very complex. Relationships are very complex. It could very well be that some interactions with this person stimulate your love for the person, and some are absolutely hateful, and you're caught in an ambivalent situation. Ambivalence is also a normal human condition. So, we're in a situation where the experience of the pain is together with the ability to accept it out of love, and that way to be able to do that avoda, which gives us simcha. There may be a connection here between this idea and an idea that I heard from the Belzer Rabbi, should be well functioning. In 1977, I was here because I had a sabbatical with my family. It was Shabbos Chazon, Shabbos before Tisha, and he spoke at Shalosh Shudas. He was speaking about the first chapter of Isaiah, which we read in the Haftarah on Shabbos Chazon a few days ago. And there, Kodesh Baruch Hu was expressing a disgust with certain mitzvos that people were doing. You come to the temple, Lama lechem ramos chatzerai. Why are you coming to trample my courtyard? Shabbatchem u'adchem sona nafshi. Your Sabbath and your holidays, my soul hates. And speaks there against korbanos. Because Baruch Hu is saying the mitzvahs, these mitzvahs that you're doing, are to me a burden and degrading. I don't want them. So the Dovid Rabbi asked, we have, according to these psukim and other places in the Torah, certain mitzvahs where we are told that a Rasha shouldn't do them. And then there's the vast majority of mitzvahs where we're not told that. Zebach Roshoim To'eva, the sacrifice of a wicked person is an abomination. Tfilas Chato, the prayer of a wicked person is a sin. Coming to the Beis HaMikdash, with that pasuk there, Ramos Chatzerai, you're trampling in my courtyards. Somebody's why are you saying my laws? Learning Torah for Russia is something which seems to be rejected. Nobody said that Russia shouldn't eat matzah, or shouldn't give charity, or shouldn't pursue justice. There are only few mitzvahs where it said that a Russia shouldn't do that. Why? What's the difference? So Belzer Rabbi said like this. First of all, there's a feature that all mitzvahs have in common. The purpose of all mitzvahs is the same. And yes, mitzvahs have a purpose. They're not self-controlled, self-contained, and independent and autonomous. The purpose of all mitzvahs is dveikus, attaching to Kodesh Baruch Hu. The Zohar talks about Tayav Itim, 613 strategies. A strategy is a means by which you get to something else. So you have to understand this. The mitzvahs don't stand on their own. They're a means to connecting to a Kodesh Baruch Hu. That's for all of them equally. Even Talmud Torah, for those who understand what that means. But then there are certain mitzvahs whose subject is dveikus. There are certain mitzvahs whose purpose is to express and actualize a condition of dveikus, so that the mitzvah is tied to actual dveikus now, not that it has that as an effect in the future. When you go to the Beis HaMikdash, when you're able to go to the Beis HaMikdash in your session, and go to the Bazar and bring a korban, you're going there because that's the place of the Shekhinah, where Hashem's presence resides. You want to connect with the Kadosh Baruch Hu there. You're going to connect. The whole mitzvah is an expression of connection. When you're praying, you're standing before the Kisei HaKavod. You're standing before the throne of glory, presenting your case before the Kadosh Baruch Hu. That is an expression of connection. And Talmud Torah also, although there it isn't quite so obvious, but the Gemara tells us that the Shimon Bar Yochai did not daven. He did all the other mitzvahs, but he didn't daven. Why? Because he's described as Torah so u'munaso. He was constantly preoccupied with Torah learning. So you say, okay, I hear that, but so what? I mean, so he's constantly preoccupied with Torah learning. What has that got to do with not davening? Well, there's another Gemara. Gemara Bracha says, certain types of suffering are an expression of the Kadosh Baruch Hu's love for the person, not any other purpose, just an expression of love. They didn't come to atone for a transgression. They didn't come to awaken you to do tshuva for a transgression. They came only as an expression of love. And there's a whole discussion among the Rishonim. What does it mean as an expression of love? Rashi says you get more reward in the world to come. The Rambam says chas v'shalom, can't mean that. The Ramban says you get kapara for a shogeg. But it's an expression of love. Now the Gemara says, not all suffering is an expression of love. And here's how you could tell whether it is or it isn't. There are two things which, if they happen, that means that either one happens, it means that it's not sufferings of love. One is that the suffering should disturb your ability to learn Torah, then that's not suffering of love. And the other is that the suffering should disturb your ability to daven, to pray. Then it's not sufferings of love. So when I learned that Gemara, I thought to myself, okay, Talmud Torah, there's a vast literature on the centrality of Talmud Torah to being a Torah Jew. But prayer, according to everyone except the Rambam, regular prayer is only the Rabbi. If I had to choose another way in which the suffering would disturb my service of Hashem and say that it wouldn't be sufferings of love, I wouldn't choose prayer. I'd choose Shabbos. One of the 10 pronouncements at Sinai, the capital crime, the whole rest. I would choose kashrus. Kashrus causes dim malay. It dulls a person's spiritual sensitivity. Why would you choose prayer as the other one, which, if the suffering disturbs it, it's no longer sufferings of love? But the answer is very simple, because prayer and Talmud Torah are two halves of a dialogue. In prayer, we speak to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and in learning Torah, he's speaking to us. And what the Gemara is saying is, suffering that will interrupt the dialogue on either end isn't sufferings of love. Out of love, HaKadosh Baruch Hu would not cut off the dialogue with the person. And when you think of learning Torah, if you meditate enough on Hashkafa Pratis, it's not an accident that you're learning this page at 10 o'clock this morning. That's not an accident. Think of how you got to yeshiva. Think how you were chosen to be in this year or at that year. Think about how the Rabbi chose the subject for this year. Think about why you weren't late this morning, you were on time, or you were well enough to be there and not sick. It's not an accident you're learning this Torah. And even if we can't decipher the message of what it is we're being taught that should change our lives, but knowing it's a message changes our whole attitude towards it. Because Baruch Hu chose to communicate His will to me in this way at this time. So, that also means that the study of Torah is an expression of a connection with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And there, you don't have the right for a Russia, a wicked person, to do it. So here again, I think you have the same difference between the verb and the adverb. The dveikus that every mitzvah is aimed at is the adverb. It's what it's for. It's not what it is, it's what it's for. But some mitzvahs, the dveikus is what the mitzvah is. And that a Russia can't take. That a Russia cannot take. That it should aim at something is one thing, but it should be it in itself. So it's the same thing here. There's a difference between the simcha that expresses what you are at the moment in the holidays versus all of the service that should be done with simcha. That adverbial simcha tolerates being together with conditions of pain, as the Torah explains it. One other aspect which I want to dwell on and expand on with respect to this idea is this. Maharal says that there's an unbreakable bond between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Jewish people. We represent Him in the world. He shows us to be the source of all of the holiness of the world and all the purity in the world. It's an unbreakable connection. And the symptom, or even perhaps the cause of its being unbreakable, is the fact that He put His name in our name. Because the word Yisrael, the last two letters are Aleph Lamed, which are one of the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So He put His name in it. Then He says, this, that He put His name in our name to express this unbreakable connection, is only satisfactory, it's only enough in Eretz Yisrael. But in Golus it's not enough. That alone wouldn't be enough. It requires His Shekhinah to be with us. Imo Anafi B'Tzara, the famous pasuk, I am with Him in pain. When we are in pain, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us. Shekhinah B'Galusa, the Shekhinah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, is in exile together with us. Without that, we would not be able to maintain that connection even in Golus. So we have to appreciate that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us even in the Golus. And that means we have to, number one, meditate on the symptoms of it and take them to heart, and then see how we can participate in it. The word tells us that when the Babylonians entered the Holy of Holies, in the Holy of Holies you have the Ark, which has the Kapporos covered, which is solid gold, and fashioned the shape of two angels. And the tradition tells us that the position of the angels on the cover was not constant. It varied depending upon the circumstances of the Jewish people vis-a-vis HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when the Babylonians went in, the two angels were embracing one another. Here, the Babylonians are burning the city, destroying the temple, and they're embracing one another. So to show you how wrong you can go, the Babylonians, says the Midrash, took the Kapporos and took it into the marketplace and said, these are the Jews. The Jews who, if they give a blessing to someone, he's blessed. And if they curse someone, he's cursed. And this is what they have in their Holy of Holies. This is what they're doing. Looking at it as purely animalistic. Well, if you live like an animal, and your philosophy is to be an animal, then you'll see things in animalistic eyes. What's the real lesson? The real lesson is this. We're triggering now a period of Golus. Golus, at least in visible terms, in observable terms, is a separation. This is like two things. It's like when somebody's going on a journey, what's the last thing you do before they leave? You have a hug. Because I want you to know that I love you. Even though we're going to be separated. That's a hug goodbye. That's at one level. And the second level is, since I still love you, I'll be with you. You won't see me. It's called Hester Panim. The face is hidden. But I'll be with you, and in that way, we won't be really totally disconnected. So you see, vision of two statues embracing, how you can look at it with what eyes you look at it. But that was the message to us. The message to us was, don't despair. Don't give up. It isn't that kind of total disconnect. Yirmiyahu says to the people, some people who thought we had a covenant with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and He allowed the Goyim to conquer us and to slaughter us, to take us off into exile. It's over. It's over. The Jewish connection with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is over. So yes, Yirmiyahu said to the people, we have a rule in a marriage, and the relationship of the Jewish people to the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always analogized to a marriage. We have a rule in a marriage. The way you sever a marriage is that the husband gives the wife a document of severance called a get. Show it to me. Where's your document? Did I ever give it to you? Where is it? You don't have it. I never gave it to you. So we're not divorced. This is a separation, it's not a divorce. And that hug goodbye also indicates that it's not a divorce. So, that being the case, we have to look for where Kodesh Baruch Hu makes that presence of His available even in those. So the Gemara tells us that one of the Tanoim went to Babylon, and he saw there a very old man, a very old Jew. And he said to him, I don't understand how you could be old in Babylon. Because the last verse in the second paragraph of Shema that we say twice a day says, in order to lengthen your days on the land. Then you're living in Babylonia. So, how is it that you got so old? So he answers, I go to the Beis Medrash early in the morning, early in the evening. I spend a lot of time in the Beis Medrash. That's the answer. So if you're a little reader, you think, what's the answer? Okay, but you're still in Babylon. You're not in Eretz Israel. So the Mashor says that the Beis Medrash and the Beis Knesses for Tefillah also, both of them, like the Gemara at the end of Menachos, from one to the other, both of them are, in our terms, extraterritorial pieces of Eretz Israel. Like the embassy. If you go down in Israel to the American embassy, when you walk into the embassy, you're standing in America. If you mail a letter there, you've got to use an American stamp, not an Israeli stamp. That's America. The Beis Medrash and the Beis Knesses are Eretz Israel in the boundaries of England, in the boundaries of South Africa, in the boundaries of Nebraska. Not literally and not totally, you wouldn't take Trumas and Mice there with a bracha. Okay, but it has that character. That was the answer of that man to the Tana. I'm living in Babylonia, but I spend my time in the Beis Medrash, by Knesses, and that gives me an Israel connection. Even in Chutz La'aretz, and the Maharsha points out that there's a Medrash that says, when the Mashiach comes and brings the Jewish people back to the land of Israel, if it happens that way, it doesn't have to happen that way, then all the Bati Medrash and all the Bati Knesses will come also. They'll all be brought to Eretz Israel. Why? Because they are Eretz Israel. They are parts of Eretz Israel. So it means that His presence is there to give long life, even in a place where you wouldn't be able to have long life, because in the Beis Medrash and the Beis Knesses, there is that presence there. Well, sometimes in the yeshiva, maybe some of the boys have heard it from me, that we talk about Tchias HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead. And that, for many people, is a hard concept to understand, a hard concept to assimilate. The Rambam holds it up as the paradigm of miracles, and he says anybody who had any questions, any hesitation about the idea of miracles, since the resurrection is one of the 13 principles, and that's a phenomenal, inexplicable miracle, so then you see that we're definitely on the page with respect to miracles. But it's hard to believe, hard to picture, hard to assimilate. I say, take a look at what happened to the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Did anybody dream of the flowering of Torah? The Mir Yeshiva here in Yerushalayim has 10,000 Talmidim. 10,000 Talmidim? Before the war, you didn't have yeshivas that big. And even more than that, the Lakewood Yeshiva in America has 10,000 Talmidim. America was the Treifa Medina. You go there to spiritually die. You throw your tefillin off on the boat. We don't need those in the new land, which is paved with gold. Did anybody dream that at some time in the near future, one of the world's largest yeshivas would be in America? That Hasidic Rebbes would come from America? English-speaking Hasidic Rebbes? English-speaking Gedolei Yisrael? It was inconceivable. That was the dead end. That was the garbage heap. And look what it has produced and is producing. Take the Baal Tshuva movement. Nothing like this is recorded in the last 2,000 years of recorded Jewish history. I don't know whether something happened like that by Sheni or by Rishon. We don't have that detailed history for that period of time. But nothing like this when things were good, and when things were bad, when things were up and things were down, peaceful times, war times, nothing like this has happened. And in 1948, with the founding of the state, it didn't happen. And with 67, with the Six-Day War, it didn't happen. It started in the 70s. So it wasn't excitement over military or excitement over politics. It wasn't there. And when it started, it was going on in America and in England and in South Africa and in Israel. And there weren't common features of all those places that could explain why it all should happen at the same time. It's an expression that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's connection with us, his ratzon, that there should be a connection, is something which is still operating. We say in about two yeshivas, this person came in, you look at his history, he must have had a great-grandmother who cried when she benched life. Must have had it because there's nothing else in the background which would lead to this. It's just not explainable in any natural terms. So the tshuva movement itself is a symptom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's continuing hashpah on us. For many of you, when you'll be a little bit older and a little bit more educated, the discovery of lost manuscripts that came to light in the 20th century, the Meiri, commentary on the entirety of Shas, a 400-page sefer on tshuva, was totally lost, and rediscovered. The Tisha Rosh, one great Rosh Yeshiva today, who told me once that on a certain Tosfos, we look at the Maharsha, if the Maharsha had the Tosfos Rosh, he wouldn't have written what he wrote. Tosfos Rosh is a different edition of Tosfos, often paralleling the Tosfos that we have printed in the Shas, but sometimes different, with different words, different order, sometimes different emphasis, and sometimes it gives you an insight into what the Tosfos. We didn't have it. Many parts of the Maharal were not available. So there's a kind of resurrection of manuscripts, Torah coming back to Klal Yisrael. That in itself, even if that was the only thing that was happening. In addition, the reoccupation of Eretz Yisrael by Jews. This is the fact that no one's denied. It's not controversial. It's not a question of politics. The fact is that there's a gigantic Jewish population here, Baruch Hashem. And my Rebbe Zatzal used to say that we should celebrate one feature of it for sure, without hopefully stepping on anyone's toes. And that is that since 1948, any Jew who wants to come to Eretz Yisrael can come. You read about the Ramban, who came at the end of his life and died here. Ramchal also died here. And Yehuda Levi, who writes, Libi b'mizrach, v'ani b'sof ma'arav. My heart is in the east, and I'm at the end of the west. An expression of despair. The Baal Shem Tov wanted to come here and couldn't manage it. He couldn't succeed. People for whom it was either impossible or extremely difficult, dangerous. They were killed here. They were assassinated here. The very fact that a Jew can make up his mind, get on a plane, and come and be here for a day, for a week, for a year, for the rest of his life is a gigantic chesed in Hashemayim. If you had told Jews 200 years ago in Poland, get together for 3 days to say all of Tehillim, and Eretz Yisrael will open up, there'd be hundreds of thousands there. Eretz Yisrael will open up and be available to us. And we have it. So these things we have to meditate on and realize the gigantic richness of the present that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is showing us. Moshe Sternberg, who's one of the Ziknei Gottlieb of Israel, he wrote a series of stories called Moadim Izmanim. And in one of the introductions to one of the volumes, he writes, I know it was common and customary for hundreds of years for people not to publish their svarim, to write manuscripts and leave them, and their descendants would publish them. There's a certain humility in it, not wanting to take credit, so on and so on. By the way, the Talmid of Rav Scheinberg went into a desk drawer and found a thick manuscript, written manuscript on the Shef Shmaitza. And they brought it to Rav Scheinberg and said, we found this in the drawer. He said, yeah, I wrote it. When did you write it? 50 years ago. He put it in a drawer for 50 years. Now, I come from academia. Hello, you have a new idea? Bang, get it out right away. Take credit for it. He put it in for 50 years. So Moshe Sternberg writes, but I'm publishing them now because every sefer that's published proves that Torah is still alive. It's still alive. People are still buying. They want to hear it. They want to learn. That was, I guess, 30, 40 years ago when he put out that sefer. You don't need any proof today. The world is, Baruch Hashem, flooded with Swarm. And new Swarm, and new editions of old Swarm. And yeshivas and libraries and people who own libraries. Look at the abundance of manifestation that Kodesh Baruch Hu gave us, and gave us for the sake of understanding that His presence is still with us. I want to make one more idea, which is a Gemara that everybody knows. You probably heard it several times, so I'll only sketch it. And I wanted to make the point that I want to make about it. Rabbi Kiva and his friends coming over Mount Scopus, and they see the temple in ruins, and all of them tear their clothes, all of them, including Rabbi Akiva. And then they start to cry, Rabbi Akiva starts to laugh, so they ask each other why their responses are what they are. And they say, a place where the high priest went in on Yom Kippur with a long thought, he would be punished for it, and now Shualim Hilchado, the verse that we read this morning, the foxes stroll there. Shouldn't we try? Rabbi Akiva says something that needs study. He says, I know two prophecies, a prophecy of destruction and a prophecy of salvation. And until I saw the prophecy of destruction take place, I wasn't sure about the prophecy of salvation. But now that I see that the prophecy of destruction took place, I'm confident about the prophecy of salvation. Well, this answer raises itself two questions. What do you mean, Rabbi Akiva? You weren't sure about a prophecy? What does that mean? How could you not be sure about a prophecy? And secondly, these prophecies are for the future. We're asking you why you're laughing now. Okay, so now you're confident that in the future it'll be that way. Well, how does that justify laughing now? So the answer to the first question, which is my own answer, I think is very straightforward. A prophecy of destruction doesn't have to happen. A prophecy of destruction is a warning. It's if you don't do tshuva, and if other circumstances don't intervene, then the destruction is going to take place. But if you all do tshuva, it's certainly not going to happen. It doesn't have to happen. You can't test, the Rambam says, you can't test prophecy by taking a prophecy of something bad and see whether it happens or not, because it doesn't have to happen. Only prophecies are something good. So now, you have a prophecy of destruction and a prophecy of salvation from the destruction, rebuilding after the destruction. So as long as the prophecy of destruction was itself with a question mark, was itself something which doesn't have to happen, I couldn't be sure that the prophecy of rebuilding would happen. But now that the destruction has happened, the prophecy of rebuilding, I know is going to take place. That's the answer to the first question, I believe. The second question is this. The Chazal say, anyone who mourns for the destruction of Yerushalayim merits and sees its building. It doesn't say will merit and will see. It says merits and sees, the present tense. What Rabbi Akiva was saying there was this: since I tore my clothes also, my laughter isn't an escape from reality. I responded to the destruction just like you did. We all tore our clothes. But we have a promise that someone who's misabel on Yerushalayim has the ability to see the rebuilding in the destruction. And that's what I see in that prophecy. That prophecy is not only a prophecy of what will happen in the future, but it's a prophecy of the rebuilding that's going on now, in spiritual terms, in Shemayim, however it's working. And that's how I can laugh. I can laugh on that present reality. That is another way of, I think, expressing of Millard's idea that in the fact that you are being misabel, the fact that you're mourning, you have something which delivers simcha directly. It delivers simcha immediately, because of the fact that since you are spiritually alive, since you are spiritually sensitive, you have the ability to see the destruction and mourn, and also the ability to see the rebuilding and rejoice.